Before we begin, an important update. Since we first released this episode, the Karen Read trial has come to a close. After years of speculation and 2 trials, a Massachusetts jury found Karen Read not guilty. Not guilty of all charges in the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. The verdict brought to an end one of the most closely watched cases in recent memory, leaving many still divided on what truly happened that snowy night. Welcome back to Mystery and Murder, analysis by Dr. Phil. I am Dr. Phil. This is where we break down some of the most fascinating and infamous headline-making crime stories. Today, we're diving deep into a case full of twists and turns that is unfolding right now in a Massachusetts court. This is one that has so many dimensions, it's going to show you a lot about what goes on when somebody gets taken to trial for a serious crime. It's a story that began 3 years ago in Canton, Massachusetts, a suburban town located about 15 miles south of Boston. A place known for its small-town charm, family-friendly atmosphere, and access to both nature and urban conveniences. In the early morning hours of January 29, 2022, John O'Keefe, a 46-year-old Boston police officer, was found dead in a snowbank outside his friend's home in this small town. There had been a storm earlier that day, and temperatures had dipped below freezing. John, a man described by his friends and family as full of life, was found by a neighbor, face down, lifeless. His blood turning the pure white snow around his body a deep red. He was found unconscious with a head injury, and authorities who responded to the scene quickly ruled out natural causes. It appeared John had been struck by a vehicle and left to die, and it was later determined he succumbed to both his injuries and the extreme cold. But what investigators couldn't immediately answer was, how did he get there? Was this a tragic accident or something far more sinister? And how did this happen just steps away from where some of his closest friends and fellow police officers were gathered inside a warm house, just having a good time and partying? But in the days that followed, a suspect emerged. Karen Read, an attractive blonde 44-year-old who had been dating O'Keefe for 2 years. But what led her to being accused of such a horrific crime? Now, at the start, Karen's involvement in O'Keefe's death was not initially clear. They didn't look to her right away, even though in these kinds of cases, one of the first places you tend to look is to the spouse or significant other. But investigators soon did focus on her as the prime suspect, and sure enough, arrested her. She was charged with manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a deadly crash. If convicted, she faced life in prison. According to prosecutors, Read and O'Keefe argued in the hours prior to his death, and that after an altercation, Read drove her car over O'Keefe, then fled the scene, leaving him in a snowbank to die. The defense team, on the other hand, claimed that Karen was innocent and was being framed. They argued O'Keefe's death was not intentional and could have been the result of an accidental fall. This brought the case into a gray area. Was this a tragic misunderstanding, or was Karen Read hiding something far darker? With no clear answers, the case became a legal battleground, with both sides presenting competing theories of what had happened. Now, prosecutors argued Karen was drunk, jealous, and angry when she hit her boyfriend with her car and left him to perish in the cold. The prosecution's argument was largely based on physical evidence, mainly the fact that there were tire marks near O'Keefe's body indicating that he had been struck by a vehicle. Another key piece of evidence, a broken taillight on her Lexus SUV, and scratches they say match O'Keefe's injuries. But Karen insisted, no, she dropped John off and never saw him again. Hours later, she and others found his body, bruised, beaten, and lifeless. Now, Karen's defense team says the scratches on his body didn't come from her vehicle. In fact, they argue John O'Keefe was beaten inside the house and then placed in the snow afterwards to stage the scene. They said that state and local law enforcement, many of whom were present at the party the night John was found dead, were framing her, allowing the actual killer to remain at large. Now, the case really had all the elements of a perfect thriller. A Boston cop found dead, his pretty girlfriend accused of murder, allegations of betrayal, corruption, and a cover-up. With that, Karen's trial quickly captivated the nation. And strangely, Karen, the woman accused of a brutal murder, somehow emerged as the star of this drama. In the months leading up to her trial, supporters of Karen Reed gathered right outside the courthouse, decked out in Free Karen Reed shirts and holding up signs. The judge, in an effort to keep the jury unbiased, put in place a buffer zone. That's right, a 200-foot zone to keep things calm and collected. So those supporters, passionate as they were, had to stay back. But nonetheless, they sure made their presence felt. This case also exploded on social media, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube. Everyone had a theory. Hashtags like Free Karen Reed and Justice for John were trending, and let me tell you, people were not sitting on the sidelines. There were protesters at the courthouse, true crime fans dissecting court transcripts, and amateur sleuths calling out alleged corruption. A support group for Karen Reed had reached almost 20,000 members on Facebook alone. Waiting outside the Norfolk Superior Court with bated breath were several hundred supporters of Karen Reed who say they're convinced of her innocence beyond even the faintest semblance of a doubt. It wasn't reasonable doubt for them. They were 100% convinced she didn't do this. Now, understand, there's a lot of emotionality here in the court of public opinion, and they're saying they don't even have the faintest doubt. They weren't there. They didn't see it. All they know is what they're reading and hearing and telling each other. The vast majority of Karen Reed faithfuls dressed in pink and sported Free Karen Reed t-shirts or costumes. Some traveled from out of state to be there for the verdict. Others came from as far as the United Kingdom. Now, here's the danger with this kind of thing. Public opinion can get really loud. And when it gets loud, it's hard for a jury to not be impacted by it. The judge will give an instruction that says you are not to consume any information other than what you hear in this jury box. If it comes on television, turn it off, change the channel. If it's in the newspaper, don't read it. If you're on the computer and it pops up Karen Reed's story, click off of it. You are not to listen to public opinion. You're not to consume news. Do not let any of this outside noise into your head because it can sway you. And that which you get in the public discourse has not been vetted. That's not evidence. it might not be anything that's admissible. And so therefore, if you let it sway you, then you're not following the rules of the court, and you could be hearing something that's not true or wouldn't be admissible. So you cannot let that into your head. But we all know when something gets so loud and so prolific in the media, particularly in this day and time of the internet, where something can just be at fingertip or in your face 24 hours a day, 60 minutes an hour, it's almost impossible to avoid it. And once the court of public opinion makes up its mind and you can't avoid it, it can have an impact, and it's hard to unring that bell. Now you start filtering everything you hear in court through information you've gotten outside the court, and it can really create a problem. Coming up, we don't know what's right or what's true. You hear somebody speculating about it, giving some theory. We can start treating that as though it's gospel, and it could have nothing to do with the facts. You've heard me say it before. Real change starts with real understanding, and that's why I've had Dr. Daniel Amen on my show many times over the years. At Amen Clinics, they do something different. They look at your brain. With nearly 300,000 brain scans from patients in over 155 countries, they take the guesswork out of mental health care. Anxiety, depression, trauma, memory issues. If you're struggling, it's time for answers. Call 866-580-6569 or go to amenclinics.com/Dr. Phil and take the first step. Call 866-580-6569 or go to amenclinics.com/Dr. Phil. Look at what you see on television, Law and Order. We tend to love things that can best be defined as pretty people with problems. You've got an attractive blonde and a good-looking guy, and it's easy to live vicariously through those people. We get fascinated with those people, and there's a certain entertainment value. We may have a kind of a humdrum life going on, or a boring month going on, or looking for some escapism. And so we get vested in this. We start trying to figure it out. And we don't know what's right or what's true. You hear somebody speculating about it, giving some theory, and we can start treating that as though it's truth, as gospel. And it could have nothing to do with the facts. The public was really divided on this. And despite that fact, what they thought would be justice in July 2024, the highly anticipated trial, it didn't flow the way they thought because it ended with no answers. As the world watched, just when it seemed like a verdict might be reached, they were disappointed because something unexpected happened. A mistrial was declared. And a mistrial leaves the question hanging in the air. What happens now? Was the case so divided that no consensus could be reached, or was there simply not enough evidence to convict Reed? After 9 weeks of testimony, the Massachusetts jury of 6 women and 6 men said they were so divided and deadlocked in their deliberations, there was just no way they would ever come to an agreement on a verdict. They said, quote, "Despite our commitment to the duty entrusted to us, we find ourselves deeply divided by fundamental differences in our opinions and state of mind." This was a note from the foreperson. It went on, "The divergence in our views are not rooted in the lack of understanding or effort but deeply held convictions that each of us carries, ultimately leading to a point where consensus is unattainable. Here's the thing. As you've heard me say before, when a jury goes in, the judge instructs them, look, I am the judge of the law. You are the judge of the facts. I'll tell you what the law is. And it's not as simple as it sounds. They don't go back there with the instruction, decide guilty or innocent. There are often several elements to a question. They have to answer all of those elements either in the affirmative or the negative. Do you find beyond a reasonable doubt that, and then it will start listing the elements. Karen Reed was present at the scene of the crime. Do you find that Karen Reed operated her motor vehicle with intent to create bodily harm? Do you find, it goes through all of these things, and if you answer yes to all of them, that leads to a finding in the affirmative on manslaughter. And then there might be 5 or 6 questions, and if you answer them in the affirmative, then that would lead you to a finding of vehicular homicide. And there are definitions given about what is manslaughter, what is vehicular homicide. So you read the definitions, then you have to answer all of the elements. And somebody might get hung up on one. Did this happen with malice and forethought? Well, somebody might say, I can't believe she did this on purpose, or blah, 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 blah. They have to go through all of these elements and debate whether each one is true or not true. You have the different levels of proof, and the levels of proof are steeper and steeper when you get into a criminal case. It starts out with preponderance of the evidence. That can be 51-49. 51%, yeah, I kind of feel more that's true than not. Or it could be 50.1 versus 49.9. I mean, it's just more likely than not. And then the next level is clear and convincing evidence. That's where you say, okay, there could be another explanation, but it's pretty clear and convincing that this is what happened. And then the steepest hill to climb is beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's where people go in, discuss what happened, and there's really no issue about which reasonable people could disagree as to what happened. That's the standard in a criminal case, because you're going to deprive someone of their liberty in most cases, sometimes their life. And that's a very high standard, and well, it should be. It takes a lot to get 12 people to agree on whether the sun's out, let alone all the different elements in a case. Now, only about 6% of cases result in a hung jury. And that's because if a jury comes back and tells the judge, hey, we can't reach a verdict, the judge is likely to give them an Allen charge or a dynamite charge where he says, hey, look, I understand, but we put a lot of time and a lot of effort into this. I want you to go back in there and do your best. Get to a verdict. The judge can send them back in there, and he or she will tell them, look, don't give up. Stick with it. We expect you to get to a verdict. And oftentimes that will get to a verdict. But if not, they come back out and say, we can't. We're not going to do it. So that's only about 6% of the cases. Now, of those, about 28% of those cases actually get retried. And of those that are retried, about 18% lead to a conviction, about 8% lead to an acquittal, 40% get dismissed, and 34% plead guilty. So if there's a mistrial, the most likely result is that it will be dismissed. The next most likely is that there will be some kind of a plea deal. The next most likely is that they will retry it. And out of that, some get convicted, and the small percentage do get acquittal. So, look, most of these cases don't ever get to a verdict. In 1 2-year period, there were 1.2 million cases that were tracked, and 70% of them pled guilty. 24% were dismissed, but only less than 3% actually went to a jury verdict. And out of that, only 6% were hung. Most cases never make it to a verdict. Something happens before it gets to a jury verdict. So this case is being retried. Prosecutors vowed to retry the case, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. This is a minority situation, and prosecutors say, no, we think we're right, and we're sticking with it. And Reed's defense attorney, Alan Jackson, said outside the courthouse, no matter how long it takes, no matter how long they keep trying, we will not stop fighting. We have no quit. So there is still no justice and no clear answers as to what really happened to John that snowy night in January 2022. Now, as her second trial is underway, we're examining the case of Karen Reed as the fight for the truth continues to play out in real time. The question is, what did happen on that snowy night when John O'Keefe lost his life? So let's take it back to January 29th, 2022. It's really a cold winter night in Canton, Massachusetts, and it's just after midnight. Karen Reed and her boyfriend John and some friends walk into the Waterfall Bar and Grill in Canton. According to prosecutors, Karen had a few drinks that night. Several, to be more specific. After that, she drove John, while under the influence, to the home of fellow off-duty police officer Brian Albert. Now, Brian's home is located at 34 Fairview Road. And this is where folks from the bar had planned to meet up to continue to hang out late into the night. Sure enough, a group gathered there, including a mix of O'Keefe's friends, fellow police officers, and other colleagues. It sounds like a normal enough night out on the town for a couple. But it didn't turn out normal at all. It ended in tragedy. Now, Karen claimed she was tired and dropped off John at the house and then drove her car home and went to bed. But John's friends insist he never even made it inside the house. When John never came home, Karen later returned to the scene to look for him. At 4:23 a.m. that night, while heavy snow was falling, Karen called a friend of John's named Jennifer McCabe. Jennifer had been one of the guests at the house that night, the after party, once they had left the bar. She also happened to be the sister-in-law of Brian Albert, who owned the home where Karen says she dropped him off that night when they left the bar. Now, according to Jennifer, she got a troubling middle-of-the-night call from Karen, who was distraught and yelling. She was looking for John because he hadn't come home yet and was not answering his cell phone. According to court documents, Jennifer said Karen was screaming, "John didn't come home. We had a fight." Now that's at 4:23 a.m. Around 5 a.m., Karen called another woman, Carrie Roberts, whose husband was friends with O'Keefe. Prosecutors say Karen told the woman that she had a crack in her taillight and was panicked, fearfully wondering out loud if she could have hit her boyfriend with her SUV and just didn't remember it. So the first call was 4:23. Okay, this is 37 minutes later. Then at around 5:07 a.m., Karen, Jennifer, and Carrie went out looking for John. Jennifer and Karen began to search. Carrie Roberts called 911 to report that John was missing. Prosecutors alleged that Reed said while they searched, "What if he's dead? What if a plow hit him? I don't remember anything from last night. We drank so much, I don't remember anything." Also at 5:07 a.m., a surveillance camera at O'Keefe's house shows Reed's SUV coming extremely close to another SUV in the driveway. Prosecutors say no taillight pieces were found in the driveway. Now that's an important detail because Karen's defense later argued in that moment her vehicle did strike the other SUV in the driveway, breaking the taillight and providing an explanation for damage they found on Karen's car. Now, let me be clear about something. The rules of the court are that the burden of proof is on the prosecution. You're innocent until proven guilty, and it's the burden of the prosecution to convince the jury that you're guilty of what you are accused of. But I can tell you, having spent years and years in the litigation arena, that that's not how it really works. I understand that that's how it's supposed to work, but I'm telling you that's not how it really works. Here's how it really works. As I said, most cases don't make it to trial. And when a case does make it to trial, here's what the jury thinks, and I've had so many jurors explain this to me over and over again in civil cases, criminal cases, felony cases, misdemeanor cases, whatever. They all tell me, and maybe this is from watching television, all these crime shows, but they all tell me that, look, we know there are so many ways to dispose of a case before it gets to trial that if it's made it this far, where there's smoke, there's fire. This case could have settled. It could have been dismissed. They could have pled out for lesser charges, whatever. But if they made it this far, there's a reason. They also believe that prosecutors don't bring cases to trial unless they really believe they can win it. They think prosecutors don't bring a case unless they've got a winner on their hands because they don't like to lose. And when that prosecutor who gets to speak first stands up, he or she has all of the trappings of the court. They're standing up and there's a judge up there on that bench. He's got a state or federal seal above his head. There's all of this rich wood and everything. There's a seal, a United States flag, a state flag. There's a bailiff over there in uniform with a gun on and badges. And there's all of this pomp and circumstance. And now this prosecutor standing up and pointing at this defendant and saying, we're down here because, think about it. When you were a kid, you're fighting with your brother or your sister and you guys knock a lamp off. What do? It's a race to see who gets to mama first, right? Primacy is important. You want to be the first one to explain to your mom how that lamp got broken. Primacy is important, and the first one to speak gets to tell the story. And the first one to speak is the prosecutor. So the jury's sitting there thinking, we're down here for a reason, and the prosecutor just told me what it was. And there's the prosecutor who's in front of this judge a lot, so they have a certain degree of familiarity. The court reporter, he or she's calling the court reporter by name. Hi, Shirley. Did I speak that clearly? Can I make that clear so you can understand it? There's all of this kind of home team going on. There's no question the defendant is at a disadvantage in this situation. So the burden of proof, it seems like, is on the prosecution, and all you've got to do is sit there and let them try to make their case. But the truth is, you better give them an alternative explanation. If you're not down there for what that prosecutor is saying, you better give them a good alternative explanation for why you are down there. And maybe it's that you're being framed. Maybe it's that they don't like you. Maybe it's because you're black. Maybe it's because you're a woman. Maybe it's because you were drinking. Maybe it's because they think you're a whore. Maybe it's because this, that, or the other. But you better give them an alternative explanation for why you're there other than what the prosecutor just said. Is not a good enough explanation. He says you did it and you say, no, I didn't. That doesn't cut it. You better give them an alternative explanation, an alternative suspect, somebody. The burden of proof truly is on you. If you're not there for why they say, why are you there? That car was damaged. If it wasn't damaged running over your boyfriend, then how was it damaged? They provide a scenario which it hit something else that caused damage, not her boyfriend's body. Is that believable? Is that enough? So you've got to really actively give them something besides just know they're wrong. This is how you create reasonable doubt. He says A, you say B, and B can't just be no, they're wrong. It has to be they're wrong and here's what's right. So this all starts at 4:23 when she makes the first phone call. Then another one at 5:07. Now they're out looking around, and as the clock hit 6 a.m., Karen was the one to spot her boyfriend. Bad idea. The one that finds the body is always suspect. She spots her boyfriend lying in the snow outside Brian Albert's home. Now, why is this always a bad sign? Because the anxiety builds, and the person that is guilty of wrongdoing, they always want to bring this to some kind of conclusion. Take a listen to this 911 call made by Jennifer McCabe upon discovering John's body.
No, police is court line. What is your emergency?
Yes, I need someone to come to 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Mass. There's a man passed out in the snow.
You're in Canton? Hold on. I'm going to transfer over to Canton Police. You called me. You're connected to Norwood, okay?
Yeah, I don't know why I did that.
It's the towers. That's right. Stay on the line.
I think he's dead. We need, you got to get here ASAP, okay?
All right, I'm going to transfer the line. I'm going to transfer to Canton.
Okay. I know. Where are the blankets? I don't see blankets, Kerry.
911, what's your emergency?
Yes, I need someone to come immediately to 34 Fairview Road, Canton, Mass.
What's going on?
There's a guy unresponsive in the snow.
In the snow at 34?
He passed out, yes. 34, the Albert resident, yes. I just pulled up and found him.
Okay, 34 Fairview?
34 Fairview, Canton, Mass, yes.
911, that's not recorded. Where's your emergency? Hello?
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you come to 34 Fairview Road in Canton?
34 Fairview?
Yes, there's a man unresponsive in the snow.
Okay. Is he blue at all?
You've got to get here, okay?
Okay. What's going on? Is he face down?
We just flipped him over.
Okay. And who's that in the background? Is that someone related?
Okay, that's his girlfriend. His name is John O'Keefe.
Okay, how old is he?
John is 46 years old.
46. How long has he been outside?
I don't know. I don't know. He got out of the car and
is he breathing?
A couple of hours. Is he Carrie? Is he? I don't know if he's breathing. There are two women trying to do his body heat, and they're hysterical.
Okay, can you just try to ask him? I know it's tough, but we already have the fire department going. They just got to know if he's breathing.
Is he breathing, you guys? No. It doesn't seem to be breathing.
Okay, do they know how to do CPR? Do they want to attempt CPR?
Can you guys, Carrie, can you guys do CPR? No, I guess he's gone.
Okay, they don't feel comfortable doing so?
No, I think he's passed away.
Okay. All right, we got the fire department and the police department on the way. If everyone's declining CPR, then I'll hang up with you, and if anything changes, you can give us a call back. Where are you guys outside?
Oh, right out front of his car.
Oh.
I know, I'm on the phone with the ambulance. I know, honey, I know.
He's not
This, so, Carrie, you got to get off him, honey. Carrie, you got to get off of him. Oh, my God, this is a scene.
Do you know if there was any alcohol or drugs involved?
They had been out.
They've been out drinking?
Yes, out, but I'm talking hours ago, maybe. And I think I don't know how long he's been in the snow.
Okay, is there any bleeding or anything? Maybe hit his head out?
Yes, possibly. There seems to be bleeding in the face.
Okay, bleeding from the face. All right.
Yes.
And how big's the pool of blood, if there is any?
Something's coming out of his nose, and one of the women is doing CPR.
Okay, one of the women is doing CPR?
Yes, they're both working on him.
All right, if she's doing CPR, just let me, just give us a call back if he becomes responsive, right? But we're on the way.
Okay, thank you.
Let me say.
Now, that 911 call from the morning John died was played for jurors in Karen's first trial. When authorities arrived, as I said, they noted John's body appeared to have been left there, and there was no immediate signs of foul play. It appeared to likely be some kind of tragic accident, at least, at first. But as investigators began piecing together the story, things quickly started to take a much darker turn. As emergency responders set upon arriving at the scene, Karen was witnessed being hysterical and inconsolable, and was repeatedly exclaiming, "I hit him, I hit him." Here's the thing. Could this be a guilt trauma response? People sometimes falsely implicate themselves in a state of shock and panic, a la Amanda Knox. It's possibly not an admission of guilt that would hold up in court, or could it be a confession right then and there at the scene? There's a lot of explanations that could go with this. They were arguing earlier. Maybe she hit him in the arm. Maybe she slapped him. Maybe she's thinking, oh my God, the last time I was with him, I hit him. Maybe she's thinking 1,000 different things. But the defense didn't go that route. They straight up argued that the first responding officers from Canton Police gave false and deceptive testimony. But that aside, we know enough from the testimony of multiple people as to what Karen's behavior was upon discovering her boyfriend dead. There's more than just he said, she said here. What can we learn from her behavior? We know she was saying she might have hit him. We heard her distraught and screaming on the 911 call, and testimony also revealed that Karen became suicidal in the hours that followed. And her father had to call police saying that she was making suicidal threats. She was talking about taking her own life. Now, what does this tell us about Karen if she had set out to murder her boyfriend, or did accidentally and wanted to get away with it? Why would she say this? I mean, did she feel guilty? And if she was innocent, why would she say this? Was this manipulation? Was she saying that she loved him so much she couldn't live without him, she didn't want to go on? Was this guilt? The last interaction they had was a fight, and she's now feeling horrible and blaming herself? You have to understand that if someone you love is found dead, and it's in a violent sort of way, and it's sudden. And I'm contrasting that to if they die from a chronic disease where you've had an opportunity to prepare yourself for it, as opposed to the shock of just finding them dead in the snow on the ground. That will put people into shock. They can be overwhelmed. Their coping energies can be depleted, and they can just say, I don't want to go on. I can't deal with this. I would rather be dead. So there are a lot of interpretations that can go in to her saying that. It can be like, I've killed my boyfriend. My life is ruined. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison or worse, so I just want to die. That's one explanation, of course. The other is, the man I love has died a horrible death, and my last interaction with him was ugly. I hate myself. I don't even want to live anymore. It could be all up and down the gamut of why they would be saying, I don't want to go on. It could be a complete panic response. Like, oh my God, what have I done? I'm overwhelmed emotionally. I can't deal with this. I'm in so far over my head, I just would rather not even wake up. There's the possibility that she didn't remember, that she was in a drunken stupor and is thinking, oh my God, what have I done? It could be pure trauma. If she's innocent, she could be just experiencing such a sense of loss and being overwhelmed that she just says, I just can't go on. Knowing that their last interaction was ugly and combative, she thinks that she doesn't deserve to live if he's dead. So, I could list out 10 or 12 different scenarios. You can't assume any one thing. But manipulation is on the short list, and guilt is on the short list. But when you look at guilt, it could be over what she's done or how she left him in the fight. Not that she left him in the snow having been hit, just guilt. Now keep in mind, Karen was also drunk. Police say they found a broken cocktail glass and pieces of taillight at the scene. A forensic toxicologist estimated that her blood alcohol content would have been around 0.13 to 0.29 around 12:45 a.m., way more than the legal limit. If it's 0.29, that's like triple. And it is possible she could have done this without realizing it. She could have been complete blackout drunk and having fear of what she could have done while she was blackout drunk. That's possible. How they're estimating this would have to be a function of how many drinks they know she had. That doesn't account for how many she may have had that they don't know when she was away from the bar, what she drank in the car or at home, based on her body weight and what she may have eaten to absorb it or whatever. But you could make a pretty good estimate just based on what you knew and how much time had elapsed since her last drink. An autopsy was conducted on John, and the medical examiner ruled the cause of death was blunt impact injuries to the head and hypothermia. The medical examiner did not find any obvious signs of an altercation or being in a fight. Here comes a big point from supporters of Karen that will come into play later that I want you to really think about. Even if there's no sign of an altercation or fight, a man is found dead in the front yard of a house full of police officers. And somehow, nobody inside that house sees or hears a thing. Does that pass a common sense test? Not saying it does or doesn't, just that will play into this. We'll talk about that more later. But first, I want to look at what we know about Karen and John's relationship leading up to the night of his death. What would her potential motive be if she committed this crime? During her first trial, the couple's relationship was described as turbulent, marked by arguments over issues like what Reed fed John's 2 adopted children, a 2021 fight in Cape Cod over how John treated her. A witness testified that Karen became upset when she believed John had kissed another woman during a vacation to Aruba. Court documents later revealed that in the weeks before the last night of John's life, and in the hours leading up to his death, the couple exchanged text messages and voicemails that painted a picture of a severely strained relationship. Investigators say that around 1 a.m. on January 29th, the night John died, Karen allegedly left her boyfriend an ominous voicemail saying, "You are a blanking loser. Blank yourself. And John, I blanking hate you." Now, plenty of couples fight, but to leave that voicemail to your boyfriend who hours later is found dead, it's not a good look. That's the first thing police are going to look at for motive. My experience in working with law enforcement, they always look at the closest relationships first. They want to rule them out first. Statistics of relationship crime say that's a pretty good place to look. You always have to consider means, motive, and opportunity. Significant others, they certainly have motive and opportunity if it's a tumultuous relationship. And in this day and time, if you got cars, knives, bats, bricks, whatever, means are not that hard to come by. We'll talk more about those statistics later. They're not as high as people think, but it's a good place to look. On June 10th, 2022, a Norfolk County grand jury indicted Karen Reed on charges of second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating a vehicle under the influence of alcohol, and leaving the scene of personal injury and death. She pleaded not guilty, was held on a $100,000 bail. She made bail, and she's been out on release since. So what does she claim happened? Her defense claims she was framed. Her attorney, Alan Jackson and David Yannetti, alleged that John was involved in a fight inside Brian Albert's house, and they claim he was beaten and his body was later dumped outside. Now, Jackson and Yannetti focused on wounds to O'Keefe's arms, which they said showed he was attacked by a dog inside the house. This is not just fishing. Jackson said during the May 3rd hearing, "We've got a fish on the hook. We just need the court to help us reel it in." Now, the Norfolk County Assistant District Attorney argued that John never went in the home and added there is no evidence that Mr. Keefe was beaten and left for dead. The Karen Reed case isn't just about whether she's guilty or innocent. It's a stark reminder that the line between justice and a miscarriage of justice can often be razor thin. And in cases like this, the truth can really be elusive. Let me tell you something I've learned after decades of interviewing criminals, survivors, and everyone in between. The truth doesn't always lie where the evidence seems to point. It lies in the why. And there's a whole lot of why missing from this story. I've also learned that your story goes a whole lot better if you're the only one alive to tell it. When Reed spoke to reporters for the first time, she stated, "We know who did it, we know, and we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know." Reed said on the courthouse steps. I tried to save his life. I tried to save his life at 6 in the morning. I was covered in his blood. I was the only one trying to save his life. John O'Keefe was a veteran officer. He had a reputation for kindness. He was also a guardian to his niece and nephew, raising them after his sister died. By all accounts, he was a good man. But he was also connected. He ran in circles with people who now sit at the center of this case. That tight-knit group of friends, some of whom were in the house the night he died, are now being scrutinized. Not for what they did, but for what they might have covered up. So the question becomes, was this a tragic accident? Or was it something more sinister? Here's where it gets dark. Karen Reed's legal team claims there's a cover-up going on, that people inside that house that night, friends of John's and fellow law enforcement officers, know more than they're saying. Text messages were deleted, evidence tampered with. Karen was set up to take the fall. So who was trying to frame Karen? Why? How? One text sent that night allegedly said she's going to get what's coming to her. That's on the next episode of Mystery and Murder. Analysis by Dr. Phil.